Fake news, misinformation, it's all over the internet. It's all over the real world too. Is there anything that Canadians can do to ensure that they're not being led by the nose, that they're not having the wool pulled over their eyes, that they're not missing out on opportunities for themselves, their business, their careers, or their family? That's the question of the day. So we've had misinformation since time immemorial. Since the first person had an opinion and wanted someone else to share in that opinion. I've had a long career in sales, marketing, advertising, and storytelling. So I understand how stories can get spun in order to create a message that resonates with audiences and leads them to a result that the brand, the company, or the politician wants. Now, for the most part, there's an ethical way of doing this, and I try to stay within that ethical box. But as you know, there are unethical people in the world. There are in sales, we call them snake oil salesmen or used car salesmen. Not that there's anything wrong with car salesmen, but when we're talking used car salesmen, we're talking about the snake oil salesman, the one person that's willing to lie to you and create a fake story in order to get you to buy a lemon of a car. Well, that's what fake news and misinformation in today's world is doing. Lobbyists and interest groups are actively organized and organizing communications teams to create fake news and misinformation to pull the wool literally over Canadians' eyes and lead them down a path that they want Canada to go, instead of Canadians thinking for themselves and figuring out where they want Canada to go. Now, before I get started, I want you to understand my bias when it comes to Canada, because that's important. Understanding the bias of the person who is reporting, the person who is giving you information, will help you understand the spin that that person is putting on the story or the information. So my bias is I believe in what Carney is doing for Canada by creating more trading opportunities and reaching out to more trading partners and building more trading corridors to get our products to foreign markets, and thereby reducing our dependence on America. Am I anti-American? Well, I like Americans. I like the people that I know that are American, but there is a downside for Canada being so closely tied to America. That is my opinion. Now, do I think Carney's right all the time? No, I don't. Do I think that Poilievre is wrong all the time? No, I don't. Poilievre has some things to say that make sense to me. The NDP has some things that make sense to me, and even the Green Party. If all you do is believe what someone says, everything that they say, then you're going to not be a critical thinker. You are going to be a sheep. You're going to have the wool pulled over your eyes and be following everything that they say, and only what they say and what their proponents or their supporters or their influencers in their camp are saying. And you're not going to be thinking for yourself. We've seen this happen in the States, and we've seen the outcome and the result of this type of mindless following in order to put someone into power, buy a product, or embrace a social justice movement. It's not all a political thing. Misinformation and fake news as a danger to Canadian society is mostly on a political level. But I would like to argue that it is also on a cultural level. As Canadians have lost a lot of what made us Canadian 30, 40, 50 years ago, before we were inundated by only or mainly American media. Once cable went off and we began streaming, we got to choose what we wanted to watch. How many Canadians chose Canadian programming, Canadian valued programming over American programming? And how does that affect how you see the world and how you see Canada and its place in it? I would say our culture has definitely changed in the last 30 years due to media and, yes, due to immigration as well. But that's part of Canada, is the whole multicultural mosaic of our nation. But that doesn't mean that Canada doesn't still have values. It doesn't mean that Canada doesn't have Canadianness and isn't different than America. It just means that it's being chipped away. The amount of people that sound the same, thanks to American media, is up compared to the regional differences in how we used to talk and the things that we used to say. Still, when it comes to fake news and misinformation that I'm talking about today, it's definitely more on the political end, and whether or not it's affecting the way that you see the world and the way that you see Canada's place in the world, and exactly what that means for Canada going forward. I want you to be a critical thinker. I don't want you to only watch one type of messaging. I don't want you to stay only in the right or only in the left. I want you to understand that there is truth on both sides and there's lies on both sides. That by being more in the middle, you can see and balance the messages to understand what it means to have the Canadian constitutional values of peace, order, and good governance. See, fake news and misinformation, misinformation can be innocent in that we're just sharing something that makes sense to us and without researching to see if there's any real evidence into its truth. And that happens all the time. We can have conversation in the real world and just kind of say something that we don't actually mean, but at the time sounds good or is an emotional response to something that was said or done by the other person. And then when we go away and we start thinking about it, and our values start to align with what we're thinking, and the emotion goes away, we realize that, oh, that's not really what I meant. But we don't think about actually going back and correcting it. We just allow it to hang in the air and assume that you aren't thinking about it, so they're not thinking about it either. The truth is, when you say something that doesn't align with your values, it doesn't align with what you really believe in, but it was just an emotional reaction to either the news or something that somebody said, who you were talking to, or the world in general, if you're on social media, is going to judge you by that. They're going to assume that that is what you mean and that is what you think. And then it reflects on you as a person, even if your value system is completely different. And once you're back in your rational, unemotional mind, you don't even think about what you had said and how it affected that other person. That's how misinformation and fake news works. It's trying to get you to have an emotional response so that you will do something or say something to either engage them in conversation because they want to call you an idiot or some other wonderful names, and I've been called some interesting things, or they want you to pass it on, which is mostly what they want. They want you to pass it on so that other people will follow them, other people will open up the document, they'll get more eyeballs, and more believers hopefully down the road. As a Canadian, it's up to you to decide what type of person do you want to be. Do you want to be a well-informed person that can see that, okay, this is an emotional response that I'm having to this headline that isn't really real. Once I go and read the article, it has nothing to do with the headline that was there because the headline was all just clickbait. See, what I try to do on Blue Sky is I'll take a screenshot of a headline and then I'll summarize the article in using 300 characters. I've had people come back and say, I thought you were saying that. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm just summarizing what the article was because most people will look at the headline and not go any further. And I want people to be more well informed. I want people to understand what was really behind the story that's there. And let's have a discussion about that topic or that story or that headline. When you have discussions with people, that's when you start opening up your mind, when you start understanding different points of view and what you really believe, because now you have to come up with reasons. You have to answer questions. You have to have evidence, proof, something to back it up. The more informed you are, the more you can critically think, the more you can be a barrier to protect Canadians from the adverse effects of misinformation and fake news. What I encourage you to do is learn how to disarm trolls. You can disarm trolls without attacking them, without getting attacked yourself. I mean, I go on to X trying to get called names, and they just start ignoring me because instead of attacking me, because I'm not attacking them. Sometimes I just give them a link of some information and say, hey, well, what about what this person said? Or what about this article? And then they come back with some thing that they obviously didn't read it and they're just having something. Now, why is it important that I put that article there? I'm not trying to get the troll to believe anything that I'm saying. I'm not trying to change the troll's mind, because the fact of the matter is the troll doesn't really even believe what he's posting. He's probably getting paid to be an interference and a malignant force in Canadian culture. Who I'm trying to address are the people that are following them. I'm trying to show that this person doesn't really know what he's talking about or she's talking about, that there's more to the story than just the headline. There's more to the idea than just one point of view. But I don't have to get into a name-calling, emotional degradation of anger and hatred. And it's all about just asking questions to try to get them to answer those questions, to show that they really don't know what they're talking about, or at least get it to the point where it looks like that way, or they have really thought out exactly what their thought process is, and other people can see that as well. You're looking for the people who are on the fence of following these influencers, on the fence of whether or not this is where the path I'm going to go down. It's getting worse. Just look in the States. Look in the States. Look at what are happening to these young men in the States who are picking up guns, putting memes and words on bullets in order, and then shooting up places in order to get their name on the next bullet, the next gun, the next hit, the next news cycle. The brainwashing that happens by being only in that one place, that one area of information and community. But they don't start there. They don't just one day wake up, go onto Discord and go looking for the people who are going to convince them to go and shoot up a church or a bar or a country club. No, they don't start there. They start on social media. They start with the odd idea. They start off with their own anger, their own insecurities, their own biases, their own experiences. And people guide them down the road to those places. But can we as a society stop them from being guided? Wake them up and say, look, this is how you start thinking critically. This is how you question everything. And you ask questions. You don't just have the wool pulled over your eyes and blindly follow. Always asking questions and looking at the other information from the other side as well and asking questions. Finding the real stats on creditable sites like Stats Canada or CPAC, watching the news press releases, press conference. You're watching the whole press conference so that it's not just the sound bites that a journalist has chosen to show you while they're spinning the story on their own biases. Having conversations with people about what's happening and asking them questions of what they think in order to form your opinion, to get more informed, to understand where other people are coming from. There's ways to disarm trolls on the internet. And I encourage you to follow me, as I will be posting more tips on how to disarm trolls, on how to be informed, on how to be a soldier against misinformation and fake news in order to ensure that Canada has a chance and won't go down the rabbit hole and end up in the state that the Americans are in today. If you listen to podcasts that you believe are creditable, please put them in the comments. Let me know which podcasts you think are credible and why you think they're credible. Don't just put the name of the podcast. I want to know why you think that is a podcast I should be paying attention to. Which mainstream news stations or newspapers, which are no longer newspapers, or magazines, do you think are creditable? Why do you think they're creditable? We have lots of different smaller media outlets that are producing some really great content that isn't as biased as the mainstream media, that doesn't have as much misinformation via talking heads who are just giving their opinions, theories, and innuendos about what they think happened in the news and what they think about what they're being asked about, even though they're completely misinformed about the actual news story. Find those, if you know that those are, you have a good idea of those news outlets, put them in the comments, share them, let people know why that news outlet is creditable, why you believe in them, why you think that they should read them. And I would encourage you to read from both sides of the political spectrum. If you are thinking that there's a ton of crime out there, then I would encourage you to go to Stats Canada and research the actual data to see what the numbers are, instead of just relying on a politician who has an ulterior motive for getting you to believe something instead of correcting your opinion. Here's the thing about the media. You may live in small town British Columbia, and you're watching the news and all the crime that's happening in Toronto, and now you believe that there's too much crime across Canada. Is that the truth? Or is that a feeling that you have because of what's happening in Toronto, that you just begin to feel that it's happening everywhere? What is your opinion? What is your feeling when it comes to how much of the stories are out there? One of the things that always surprised me right after 9/11 was people were like, watch the sky, make sure there's no planes. I'm in Calgary and they're telling me, make sure there's no planes that are going to hit the towers. There's no indication that at any time that there would be planes that would go and hit towers in Calgary in 2001. There weren't any towers high enough for that. But because we had seen it happen in New York, suddenly people from around North America were scared that it was going to happen where they lived, even though there was no evidence to back up that feeling, that fear, because that's what fear and anxiety does to us. It makes us want to believe that it could happen. Maybe it'll happen here. And then we get scared. And then we start believing in the misinformation and fake news that's out there, because they're tapping into our fear and our anxiety, and they're making us believe that the impression that we have, the feeling that we have, is truth. And I'm here to tell you that that's not truth. Feelings will lie to us. Our emotions are there, but they don't always tell us the truth. Be rational, do your research, listen to credible people, listen to people all different aspects, not just one channel. And please, if you see a troll, don't just block them. Think of the other people that they're affecting and share some sort of article in the reply saying, hey, well, what about this story from a credible source? And leave it at that. Don't get into an argument with them. Don't become emotional. Just give them a fact, because you're not trying to convince the troll. The troll isn't there to be convinced. The troll may not even believe what he believes, like I said. You're there to help the person that the troll is trying to lead down the path to self-destruction. Well, until next time, peel out.